This week's show brought to you by the Electoral College. You're a fan. I'm curious why you're listening to this. Welcome back to another Boxscore Geek show. I'm your host, Dre Alvarez, also known as Nerd Numbers, and with me, as always, is our producer and own voice of God, Brian Foster, a.k.a. Boxscore Brian. Say hey, Brian.
Good evening, Dre. And, we've got a lot of NBA to talk about tonight. It'll be a subdued show, but that's okay. We'll be professionals and get through it.
Dude, so if you're listening to this, you may have noticed we did not do a show last week. In fact, if you tuned into twitch.tv/nerd, you may have noticed a new kind of show, although I don't even know if I qualified as a show, Brian. Myself and my friend Landon have been playing through Super Mario Brothers 3. We talk about a book called Console Wars, and so we're going to be doing this for a while, playing through some Nintendo games, possibly Sega games, and discussing the history of video games, because as you can tell from my background, I'm a big fan. We did just not feel in the mood to podcast last week, in large part because last Tuesday was the election. Donald Trump, despite being a huge underdog according to all the polls, ended up winning. So if you're listening to this in the future, we just kind of had our wind kicked out, as I kind of said in the teaser. It's not really a surprise. We're pretty left leaning on this blog, on this podcast, It's a funny note. If you listen to some of the old shows, one of our normal co-hosts, Patrick Minton, a.k.a. NBA Geek, he will usually make some comment like, I don't like having a bunch of rich white guys. None of us are rich, but, a bunch of white guys discussing women's rights, minority rights, etc. And I hate to point out, while I do normally put myself in that bin of white male because I am actually mixed. My mother is white. In regards to Trump, being Latino in this country has gotten a whole lot more terrifying, even just in the uptick of hate crimes, of just kind of that people are saying. I'm about to have a son. If you see my face, if you're watching the show live, I have a pretty thick beard. I decided to do a quote-unquote playoff beard until my son was born. So if he wants to get born soon so I can stop looking so raggedy, that'd be nice of him. I'm a little, off-put about the possibility of what he might have to put up with in school, etc. It's kind of interesting where there have been lots of strides in progress, and I've felt, very privileged in that regard. And Donald Trump as president is one of the few places where it was kind of a very harsh reality check, so to speak. So we're going to probably talk that some at the end, but what we're going to do first, we're going to talk the NBA. So sorry for that super long teaser, super long intro. Basically, our bad that last week the blog basically went dark. Top 10 box scores of the week on Monday. This is a regular segment. I'm going to be doing this every week. I'm going to shout out, I'm going to call him the Ice Dagger. So Art, if you're listening, I'm going to try to remember to add that to the script, Brian. But Art is one of our regular commenters. And I'm calling him the Ice Dagger because he is someone who will regularly comment on my top 10 lists, and it's a dagger to the heart because it usually means I forgot a very obvious name. Obviously, this season, if everything goes well, Ryan, we're intending to do more of our other top 10 lists. I'll try and link some of those. But, at bare minimum, we have top 10 box scores of the week, which is a weekly column where I just pick 10 box scores that I like. They're not the 10 best according to points over par, which is the metric we use around here. They're not, the 10 worst. They're just kind of an intermediary. I'll give you a little bit of insight into my brain. So Brian, I'm assuming, has links the one I put up this week. And Otto Porter took down Steph Curry. But so as an example, Steph Curry on a normal week would have won my number one because he got the most in a game in NBA history, taking the record from, I think it was Kobe Bryant, and I'm going to get the first name wrong. It's Marshall was the first name. I think it was Danielle Marshall.
It was Danielle Marshall.
Someone gave me some flack about it on Twitter. The real point is I didn't care that Steph Curry was sharing the record with Marshall. I cared that he was sharing it with Kobe, who, by the way, Kobe, for those of you that don't know, was actually a really bad three-point shooter for most of his career. Basically, despite the fact that he had that, he was just a chucker. So, I really love that Curry kind of has the record all to himself at this point. But that didn't make my number one. The number one, actually, the top points over par game by Otto Porter. But I kind of pick and choose. I really love triple doubles. I really love 2020s. I usually try and find the best rookie game. I always put the worst game of the week in the spot. there are multiple bad games. I put, the lowest on the list. So it's kind of an amalgamation of scores that are interesting to me. But obviously, since there are hundreds, right, Brian? Hundreds of NBA games in a week. There are 30.
That sounds right. Yeah.
There are 30 teams, and they each play
3 or
games.
4. Yeah.
Maybe not hundreds, maybe about 100. There are probably about 100 games in a week for NBA. It's going to be really hard for me to catch all the good box scores. And Art commented that I missed a great performance by Andrew Wiggins. So if you want me to include a box score in the top 10 box score list, put it in the comment section. Tweet me nerd numbers. Tweet BSG #BSG top 10. Any of those work. Oh, also, I guess I should put on our Facebook page, Brian. We have Boxscore Geeks on Facebook, Boxscore Geeks on Twitter. Any of those avenues work because I guarantee you, if by the time Sunday night rolls around and I'm putting them together, this week was Monday. Actually, there was I needed to fix some code to get them all. But if Sunday night, Monday night, when I'm working, if I don't see them, they're not going to make the list. So keep that in mind. Really enjoy that segment. Any comments on any of the top 10 scores? We've got 3 weeks now, Brian. Obviously, James Harden is making this list pretty damn regularly, as is Russell Westbrook. And sadly, Moutier, it's kind of a mixed bag. He's made the list, I believe, 2 times for horrible performances and 1 time for a good performance.
Yeah, so we'll get to Chris Paul and the Clippers in a little bit. And I do want to talk about Steph Curry right now, too, and a few of the games that he's had this week. But one thing I'll say that, Skype has got your back here, Dre, as far as your beard is going. It's really crapped out, so you look like one of those witness protection programs right now. So you'll be okay. You'll survive the first few weeks of Trump, at least, on that. And I also, as far as last week goes, Patrick said, I don't want to yell for an hour straight on camera. And that's kind of how I felt, too. I think it was anger more than timidity that shut us down last week. But here we are. We're back.
Even though I'm the king of tangents, Brian, I'll be mean and say, let's get on to the NBA and we'll talk politics at the end.
Oh, yeah. No, I need to say something in the last segment before I started this one is all. So what I wanted to talk about here was the Steph Curry game where he broke the NBA three-point record. And I emailed this to you guys, but the local media and all the beat writers and everyone, he had an 0 for 10 three-point shooting game directly before the game he broke the single-game record. And after that, after he broke the record, here's the 100% universal take that everyone had was, I knew it. He has the heart of a champion. I knew he would bounce back from that 0 for 10 and have an amazing game. And then he had, I think, another amazing game after that. And to me, that just kind of highlights the mainstream media's misunderstanding of how statistics work.
Well, let's give them a little credit, because I do think that if you don't have a reason to believe a normally good player has a problem, aka an injury. So if that, the playoffs last season, I think it's really important for people to remember Steph Curry, who was the league MVP, who was, had one of the most historic NBA seasons, was not healthy for 75% of the playoffs. Didn't he get injured in round 1?
He did, either round 1 or 2, but the point is, he played hurt for the whole playoffs.
I thought he got injured in round 1, was it against the Rockets, and then in round 2 he got another injury, and then by the finals he just did not look like himself. So I think there are perfectly good reasons for good players to play bad, but regression to the mean, and we all know this. So it's a really, really easy take to have if a good player has a bad game, or even what I'll call a cubic zirconia player like Kobe, or in later seasons, or Carmelo Anthony or DeMarcus Cousins, these players that regularly put up 20-10s or 30-point games, they're not really that great, and they have like a 15-point game. It's not really hard to say, well, they're probably going to go closer to the mean. So I don't hate the media for that, but I think to your point, the fact that they're saying that 0 for 10 game was extra motivation he needed, we have no idea, and we kind of hate that post hoc beats rationalization around here, which are definitely talk more about politics. Get Dikembe Mutombo, get that stuff out of here.
Well, so here's what this made me think of is this infamous episode of Radiolab. It is season 6, episode 1. For anyone that doesn't have the link, I'm showing right here. And one of the segments in that is they talk to a statistics professor who, one of the things that she does is I'll just try to go through this real quickly, but she basically divides her class up into two groups. One group flips a coin 100 times and records the results, random results. The other group has to make it up. They have to do a fake trial of 100 without actually flipping it and try to trick the professor. And what she said is every time she looks at the results, she knows within a millisecond who's the real one and who the fake one is.
That's hyperbole because I think that may be faster than her synapses can even fire. But yeah, continue.
I would say 0.05 milliseconds at the very most. But anyway, the point of this is that the way how she knows every time who the fake team is they fail to put in these streaks of, many heads or tails in a row. So if we're thinking about this in basketball terms, right, Stephen Curry's games, the mainstream media is like, oh, he's a 45% three-point shooter. If he's not shooting 45%, he's having a good or bad game, right? But really we know it's all these different points on the graph that make up the combined 45%. So I'm just saying it's variation is all. It's just kind of, that's a natural variation, and it's just funny to me that that's where that went. So anyway, Steph Curry, yeah, he had some pretty good games after that 0 for 10. He must have been motivated.
All right. Well, I mean, I might actually talk about this, and I believe that episode was called Stochasticity.
That's right. Yep.
But what I was going to say, Brian, is I actually may put this in a future post, and I've mentioned it a few times, but I don't know if I put it in already, but I call it memorable insanity.
Yeah.
And my basic point about this is that there was a 2-week stretch at the start of Jeremy Lin's career in New York where people were calling him the next Michael Jordan. And as a flashback to that, right now DeMar DeRozan is playing really, really well, and people are comparing him to Michael Jordan. And the point I have is it's possible, right? It's possible DeMar DeRozan has turned a corner and is going to be a great player. But players in the NBA are streaky, just like you're saying. And it's annoying that people forget this, and then they kind of try, as I keep saying the word post hoc, just very snobbery, but this trying to explain the motivation for why a player had a good or bad game is just, it's a futile endeavor. And it's, I understand the need for it. The economics guys in their most recent book, Think Like a Freak, mentioned that one of the best ways to explain statistics and stuff is really getting a story. It's one of the reasons Malcolm Gladwell is really popular, is because he takes boring lab experiments and makes a story out of them. But what we do have to be careful of when we have these stories is to go, how much of this story is true and how much of this me just made? And so we spent way longer on the Steph Curry 13-point game than I was expecting, Brian, but I shouldn't be shocked with you as the, what am I looking for, Warriors homer. But that's the point, is that as soon as you get all of these different things together, you really can't explain it anymore. And so that's just kind of where we're at.
Well, I just love the opportunity to jump in and get an analytics thing in there. So there we go, a stats thing.
All right. And another thing I was going to say is your next subject, and one I really want to talk about. I've actually go out of my way to make him show up on the Boxscore Geek Top 10 list a few times. Because what's actually happened is he is too good, and that means their games are too short. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Chris Paul is the best player in the NBA. It's not even close. Just in general, Chris Paul and actually Steph Curry last season are these players that I've said put up production levels like their centers, but they're point guards. And I hate to have to explain this over and over and over again, but people don't get it. One of the things we do at the Boxscore Geeks, we use the which produced points over par metric. Both of these metrics use a very similar strategy that's been used in baseballs for years called above replacement. We just do wins above average, essentially. So we take players, we lump them into their positions. Currently, we have point guard, wing, big. There's some discussion about that, but just the basic point is we accept that there's a player that's responsible for holding the ball. There are players that are responsible for hanging out on the perimeter. There are players responsible for staying next to the hoop. And those different responsibilities impact what can affect their production. I mean, obviously, hanging out by the hoop means you're more likely to get rebounds. Having the ball means you're more likely to get assists. Hanging out on the perimeter is going to affect your shooting efficiency. So the thing is, throughout all of NBA history, and everybody kind of knows this, bigs, centers in particular, tend to put up the biggest numbers in terms of points and rebounds. That's just a known thing, and it's tremendously valuable for winning the NBA. It's not really shocking when you kind of, with the exclusion of, I think, the Bulls, I can't really name a dynasty team that didn't have a dominant big. And even the Bulls had Horace Grant and Dennis Rodman, who are just kind of vastly underrated players. So with that in mind, Chris Paul, though, he's like a 6-foot-tall point guard, and he puts up numbers that make him look like a 7-foot-tall dominant. I want to stress that dominant big. And yeah, currently, we'll see. It's always on Brian to go to listen to these shows in hindsight, because I'm going to read some numbers off now, and of course, 2-3 weeks, those all can come crashing down to earth. But Chris Paul currently leads the league with 3.6 wins produced. He's got a point over par of 14.6. What that means, for those of you that remember, if you put Chris Paul on an average team, had them play an average team for a full 48 minutes, you would expect that team to win by 14.6 points. The best teams in NBA history, like hate to rub salt on Brian, but like the Warriors last season, have had about a 10-point edge in that. So Chris Paul is like 46% better right now, according to our numbers, than the best team in NBA history. Per 48 minutes, he's averaging 30.2 points, 8.9 rebounds, 13.5 assists. And one thing I should stress when I say per minute is he's averaging about 3 minutes a game, because the Clippers are just destroying opponents, and they're basically pulling a Spurs, where Chris Paul, DeAndre Jordan, Draymond Green are just sitting on the bench in the fourth quarter. But Chris Paul is just amazing. He's magical. He's shooting the best of his career. He's passing. He's doing everything. This is why we love Chris. He does everything. And as a result, the Clippers are just dominating the league. Now, what I should note that's kind of, I don't want to say worrisome, but if you look at the Clippers, they are very top-heavy. It is really Chris Paul, DeAndre Jordan, and Blake Griffin pulling that train. Luke Richard Mbah a Moute is playing pretty well right now, too. That's kind of it. Ray Felton's playing a little bit above what we want. So the real question for the Clippers is going to be, how well does this core continue to play well? That being said, if we've talked a lot about top heavy teams in the playoffs. This team is set, especially if the Warriors stumble a little in the playoffs again. Obviously, OKC was weakened by the lack of Durant. If the age catches up with the Spurs, so the Clippers are looking in a great spot. Although, like I said, I'm going to keep bringing up. You call it small sample size theater too, Brian. I call it remember the insanity. But basically, we're 10 games into. That doesn't mean anything yet.
No, I think we should call it the Remember the Insanity, because other people say small sample size theater. That's not exclusive to us, so we got to pick our own things. But yeah, I mean, you said it. Chris Paul is on his way to an all-time great season if he keeps it up. Not very likely, and just
another all-time. He has put up some of the best NBA seasons out of a point guard in NBA history.
He has. Injuries have really been the only thing that have ever slowed him down. So when he gets hurt for a few months, we kind of forget, oh, wait a second, he's actually one of the best players of all time. And he's definitely showing it again this season. Now the question is, can he keep it up? Well, what's it all due to? It's he's gotten a lot of assists in the past before and kept his turnovers down. So he can keep the point guard stuff up probably. But his rebounding is a career high. His steals are a career high. And if we go down to his shooting, he's at 63% true shooting, which he's never quite gotten to before, although he has been high 50s. Big part of that is due to 44, almost 45% three-point shooting, which he's also never done before. As I mentioned earlier, that's Steph Curry territory. So, yeah, he's going to come back down to earth, but he's not, doing anything outlandish for Chris Paul, who is a great player.
Well, his wins per 48, and which is the one we use, is 0.568. Average is 0.1. So he is playing almost 6 times as good as an average point guard right now. The best players in NBA history in modern era have been around 4 times as good as the average player. So, again, it's not that we're even saying Chris Paul won't continue to play great this season. We're just saying we have not seen a player play as great as Chris Paul is right now at a sustained pace for a full NBA season. Now, if it happens, it's the same as Russell Westbrook. I will gladly admit being wrong. That's what you're supposed to do. But That's what you got. I will throw a little shade, by the way, Brian. So I'm going to put this on, if I didn't put it on the script, the top 10 MVP list over at NBA.com. NBA.com does not have Chris Paul on the list. They do have Blake Griffin, who is playing quite well, but for F's sake, not having Chris Paul on that list, I'll try and say the author's name. I'll probably muck it up, but it's like Sekou Smith. You don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, Sekou Smith.
Just hang up your analytics goggles or whatever, or calculator or whatever. People make these jokes about analytics. They'll say like slide rule, graphing calculator, stuff that none of us use anymore. But yeah, hang all that stuff up. Get out of here. That's what I got to say about that. Now, the next team, actually, I'm really glad you got this on the script, though not the heading I would have put, Brian. You brought up that the Atlanta Hawks, let's see, are they still second in simple rating system according to Basketball Reference?
Yeah, they were as of this morning or this afternoon whenever I looked at it, but
yeah, they are playing. So that could change by the time this goes live. But you brought up the Atlanta Hawks, who are just playing quite well. They're up by 1 currently against the Miami Heat. But one reason I really wanted to bring him up is Dwight Howard is back. Dwight Howard is playing like Dwight Howard of old, and that's huge. He's averaging 25 points and 20.8 rebounds per 48 minutes. He's putting up 3.2 blocks per 48 minutes, 2.0 steals. I mean, the only thing he's really doing bad is you'd expect him to foul out if he played a full game. But he's averaging rate-wise career highs in rebounds, not career highs in scoring. He's scored better in the past. He's just playing, kind of actually better, to be honest. He's playing at better levels than he was playing in Orlando, and that was his best. Now, the same question we had with Dwight Howard in Houston is, can he keep his health up? But that being said, he is a huge part about why the Hawks are doing well. Another player playing really well Hawks right now, I would argue another unsustainably so great, but it's Thabo Sefolosha, who was a player that was really good, and people seem to forget he had his knee broken, I believe, by the police near the playoffs a few years ago, and I think people have undersold how good he is. Now,
and he's had injuries from playing as well, so yeah, he's another guy where great when healthy, and he is right now.
Now, one sad note, we kind of talked a little bit about this preseason. Kyle Korver, who kind of had some outlandish seasons, and as a player that is really a scorer, that is his role, does seem to be getting old. It's worth noting that Kyle Korver is definitely up there in age. Now, his shooting is still great. I just don't think he's putting up the same number of shots and doing the other stuff as well as he was in the past. So we'll just have to see how this goes. I mean, what we're noticing right now with some teams, the Hawks and the Clippers in particular, is they're playing amazingly well, but basically you can point to 2 stars on their team that are pulling the weight, and to ask yourself, or actually be honest with yourself and say those stars probably will not be able to keep it up forever.
Yeah, and I like the comment on Korver. He probably is just a 3-point specialist now and not, a star like he was a couple years ago. He's probably got to be more like a Klay Thompson type. Now, one guy who's playing really well for them in a pretty decent amount of minutes is Mike Muscala, who's a guy that we like coming out of college and had good college numbers. Hasn't really done too much yet, so he's young. We'll see if he can actually do anything, but it seems like the Hawks are ready to give him some minutes. Problems for the Hawks, though, is Kent Bazemore and Dennis Schroeder, their starting backcourt, I think. Those guys are both pretty average to mediocre, and they have contracts, especially Schroeder's got his new contract. They're going to get big minutes and chuck the ball up, and it's just not the best backcourt in the world. So we'll see if defense and Howard can pull them through, but yeah, they aren't much of a threat from the outside.
What I was going to say here, this wasn't on the script, Brian, but let's add it. But I still just have to shake my head at the George Hill trade.
Yeah.
I think I was a little too nice to the Pacers because George Hill's numbers for the last couple of seasons have been great. And Jeff Teague wasn't a great player, but he was an above-average point guard. And so I was utterly baffled by the Hawks and Pacers' willingness to basically downgrade their point guards and give, in essence, Utah the only thing they've ever really needed, which is true. Utah has been weak in the backcourt for years, and not only did they give him a serviceable point guard, they gave him one of the best point guards in the league. And barring kind of some injury stuff, George Hill has been playing great this season. So that trade in general is just baffling. So what you're talking about the Hawks, it is kind of odd where we can agree that getting Dwight Howard was a great move. Thabo being healthy is great as well, but did they really need to strip their backcourt? Because where could they be right now if they had a slightly better backcourt?
Yeah, and to your point, Utah is the 8th ranked team in SRS now. They've moved up, so yeah, they're playing well so far. Because we all know they have a great front court, right? Favors and Gobert, who they smartly extended. That was a great extension for Gobert. They're going to be good for a while.
And George Hill now too. I mean that's what you. I mean, let's. I won't harbor on this too long. Just Moutier reference again, but the Nuggets, they lucked into Jokic last season. Yeah, he's looked great, and Nurkic this season has shocked me in looking really good. And of course, we've always loved Kenneth Faried. Now, I can kind of agree with some arguments about it's crowded and whatever, but being crowded in the front court is a good problem to have. When you have 3 really good bigs and one of them kind of just has to get underplayed for you to have all 3 on the team, that's not a bad problem. Moutier is shooting him out of games, whereas you look at Utah and they're in a very similar situation, but instead of Moutier, who's terrible, they have a great point guard. So it's very sad for me as a Nuggets fan because the Nuggets are similar, where they have a really good front court and they just need a point guard, not even a great point guard, and we have Emmanuel Moutier.
I don't have the stat right in front of me right now, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Nuggets have the biggest starting front court in the NBA. They've got Gallinari at small forward, who's 6'10" or even bigger. They've got Sabonis, who's close to 7 feet. And at center, they've also got a 7-footer. So, I mean, that's a huge front court for the Nuggets. I'm impressed they're doing that.
Yeah, I mean, if there is nothing more in NBA history that saddens me more than Ty Lawson's, falling apart as badly as he did, because I think if you believe that Moutier has the skills and talents to one day become a good player, I'm starting to question that. But if you believe that, had he been a backup point guard, not really getting leaned on, and Ty Lawson getting a majority of the minutes, he could have grown. And we've talked about this before. I talked about finals MVPs and pointed out that Kobe Bryant, Kawhi, and Dirk are 3 examples of players that didn't really, when they started their careers, weren't starters, came off the bench, slowly got built up on good teams. And I've questioned what that does for long-term sustainability of greatness. For as much as we bash Kobe for being overrated, you can't really deny the fact that he lasted for like 20 seasons. So with that in mind, all I can say is I can't help but wonder that if you think Moutier has the talent to be something great, if he didn't get wasted by basically being put in the starting role and told you need to carry this team, and whatever habits he's learning, they're terrible. I'm going to keep making this note, Brian. Moutier is making Kobe Bryant's retirement season numbers look good, and that's not something you want.
Yeah, we've got a really active chat right now. So, in fact, Mario Chalmers says Moutier is on pace to be the worst player of all time. I don't know if I'll go that far, but he did have one great correction. Of course, it's not Sabonis on the Nuggets. I just saw the Nuggets and Oklahoma City play recently, who he really plays on. It's Jurkic and Nokic.
Did you say Sabonis?
Nurkic and Jokic, who are their 2 bigs. So Nurkic is having a great start to the season. Anyway, thanks for that correction.
At the end? I've been saying at the end. So cool. Thanks for if I'm getting the pronunciation wrong, I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I just know those are big dudes. But, just to finish up on the SRS, the Hawks are number 2 at 8.8. The Clippers are at 16.93 at number 1. That's probably not sustainable. They'd want to be one of the best teams of all time. But that's kind of how dominant they've been. Twice the margin of the second-place team is pretty ridiculous. Spurs are 3rd, Cavaliers 4th, Raptors 5th to round things out. Not too surprising there. All those teams have much more, average, strong SRS rankings. So, yeah, interesting start to the season with, I'd say, most of the teams we expect to be up there, but the Hawks and Clippers especially being really good at the start of the season. I think I wasn't I'm not shocked yet by either. I mean, obviously, I don't
believe these numbers to be sustainable. I mean, I think it's, a lot of it comes down to Dwight and CP3. And so we'll just see what they do. I'm going
None
to
of
call
these
this.
teams in the top 10 are massive surprises, right, Dre? Like maybe shuffle the order a little bit, but I think we expect these to be, near the top 10 teams.
I was going to, actually, I completely lost my train of thought. Let's get on to the next subject, Brian,
Let's do
which
it.
I'm going to call boring. You put on, Brian is a very good researcher, and he will definitely look up things around the NBA. Sometimes I don't catch them. And the next couple of subjects are ones I don't care as much about as Brian does, but let's get through them. So the first one you want to talk about is the CBA may be agreed on just after Thanksgiving or in early December. And I'll let you go on that, make my thought, then we can move on.
Yeah, so that's pretty much it. Is there's been a slow drip of rumors about what's going to happen with the CBA. And the first time we talked about it a few weeks ago, I was kind of shocked that there wasn't going to be a lockout because that was the big story that everyone thought was going to happen. But apparently, now that Billy West, is that his name? And Billy Hunter, sorry, Billy West is the voice actor. Anyway, Billy Hunter and and David Stern are gone. I guess the acrimony and the negotiations is gone, and Silver and Michelle Roberts get along really well. They're, more and more news. It's like you said, it's going to get hammered out within the next few weeks, according to Real GM reporting and others as well. And there's a few interesting things that might be in this new CBA, from what I saw anyway. The first is that I was kind of surprised that the Players Association just agreed flat out we are going to keep the 50-50 split of the basketball-related revenue the same, because one of the things the players were unhappy about is that they lost a big percentage of it. They might have been up as high as maybe 56% before, Dre, or 55.
7. And in the article that linked, what they said is they argued for, so that 50% you're talking about is basketball-related income.
That's right.
So what they're saying they did is that they said more things need to be included in that. And so basically they're going to, in theory, get more money because while they're not getting a bigger percentage, they are getting more things included in that. Now, I think it's funny because the very article you brought up, the Real GM one, says they're saying had they argued for a couple percent more, they wouldn't have gotten it. Now,
right.
I think that's true in the sense that when you look at the CBA, on the one hand, you have a bunch of people that went to school for 1 or 2 years because of the one and done rule, right? That are not savvy business people. They've trained their entire lives to be good at basketball and their experience is basketball. And then on the other side, you have a bunch of essentially billionaires who have, made their money in the world of business. So, basically, I think that the owners are not really that smart about basketball when it comes to team construction, et cetera. That's pretty much one of the major premises of the show is that NBA owners don't know how to make a winning basketball team for the most part. But that being said, when it comes down to, them fighting in courts and negotiations, I am not shocked that the billionaires with lawyers and years of business experience tend to beat out the basketball players. And that just tends to be the way it always is. So I don't know if I agree with all of what's said in the article, because in the article they're saying we couldn't have argued for more, but we're happy with what we got. I think right now everybody's happy, and we've mentioned this on previous shows, Brian. Everything's going well, right? The NBA is doing better than it ever has before. They have the biggest money, the biggest contracts, et cetera, et cetera. I think the owners might know, I could be wrong, that a lockout is not going to be feasible this time around, in large part because, the Bucks sold for $500 million. The Clippers sold for $2 billion. Teams are selling for the highest they ever have. They just signed the biggest contract ever. In this last offseason with the CBA going up, teams threw money around like mad. So I think the owners kind of know they can't really lock out and squeeze as hard this time around. So the players got a slightly better deal than I think they would under normal circumstances. I still think the owners won this one, but that's just me.
You could be right. And again, this is like really fuzzy math based off of rumors here. We'll have to wait until, Larry Kuhn breaks down the actual agreement when it comes out. But it was just an interesting point to me that I was really surprised that the union didn't try to claw back some of that basketball-related income percentage. And it looks like it's kind of coming out as to why, because they expanded the definition of it, and instead of getting a bigger piece of the pie, they're trying to get a bigger pie, basically. So, and I can see how both sides can save face on that, because the players are going to be happy just because they're getting more money. The owners will get to, assert their dominance, saying we didn't have to move the percentage. So, I don't know, just kind of some interesting negotiating stuff. We'll see what happens with it. This other stuff is less interesting, so we'll just go through it real fast. More detailed domestic violence policy. Whatever. I'll believe it when I see it. Pro sports hasn't been very good at this regard. It sounds like you had something to say here, though.
All I was going to say is, this subject always is rough because it's a very nuanced subject and hard to talk about in the way it deserves. And I think, in general, our thoughts on professional sports leagues, NBA, NFL, et cetera, have been that they kind of do the lip service they need to get people to stop shouting at them, and then kind of push it under the rug until it comes up again. So I think your take is right, Brian. We'll believe it when we see it. And even seeing a harsher domestic violence policy doesn't necessarily mean they will improve domestic violence. And that's the rough part, is that it's really a shame that these leagues that have a lot of clout, I don't even necessarily think they're helping the problem when they try and quote unquote help. I think they just kind of draw kind of fake awareness to themselves. But I'll steal what you always do in these situations, Brian. Let's remain optimistic that that they do it right.
Well, yeah, you explained that a lot better than me. It's not that I think domestic violence is uninteresting. I actually use that word. I just think this is an uninteresting news story because, like you said, it's probably just lip service. Now, to give the alternate point of view, there are some quotes from Michelle Roberts here. Again, she's the head of the Players Union, actually saying that I think we need more than discipline. It needs to be about counseling, support services, innovation, outreach, and providing resources behind the scene. Maybe they'll get there, but yeah, I'd be surprised. So then the last thing is they're expected
to... such a snorer. Oh my God. I can't believe you put the... I'm going to let you do it, bro. I'm going to let you go.
No, this is a big thing.
Topic ever, but keep going.
Shortening the preseason, so the season starts earlier and there's less back-to-backs. There's been a lot of complaints about back-to-backs. This is a great idea. The preseason's way too long. Hopefully all this stuff happens in the new CBA.
I'll retreat a little and agree that yes, fewer back-to-backs is good. I think I'm not going to remember to put this in the script, so apologies, listeners. You'll have to have remembered that I said it. But I believe some of the research has basically shown that injuries are more common in back-to-back games, that players are more likely to hurt themselves on the second night of a back-to-back. So, all right, Brian, I take it back. Wasn't the most boring thing you could put in, but let's move.
Well, I didn't talk very long about it, at least.
All right. So we OKC is fascinating because I will say there was much more optimism. We could call this a Michael Carter Williams like scenario. The Thunder start out 3-0. Russell Westbrook's averaging a triple-double. Who needs Kevin Durant, right? Since then, they've gone 3-4. Russell Westbrook is still playing quite well. He's had a few bad games, but, like I said, he made the list last week with the best triple-double of the week. But what's the deal? The candid response I have is they've got some good players. They're fine. Don't freak out. You mentioned the exact same thing with Streaky, right? A 6-4 record, that's winning 60% of your games. A team that wins 60% of their games over an entire season is about a 50-win team. And let's also not forget that they've played some good teams. That being said, I do wonder, like, Cantor is a fast. This seems to be the Thunder's MO. It was true with James Harden. It's true with Cantor. You've got a guy. You give him a bunch of money. He plays off the bench and doesn't play major minutes. We'll just have to see. Oladipo is not really panning out yet, but again, small sample size theater. Remember Linsanity, it's only been 10 games. I'm not really ready to freak out just yet. That's all I got. That's really boring, I think, Brian, but
well, though, here's why I put him on there. And I think they're in fine shape too, but it was just really interesting to me, the timing of these two contract extensions. And, for those who missed it last week or whenever it was, it's specifically Oladipo and Steven Adams both got extended to, I don't think it was max, but pretty big contracts. And I think overall, Adams, that's probably good. Like, he's a great young big man, and I think you want to lock him up when you can. Oladipo,
we've this a lot, but in the NBA, if you're going to overspend on a position, overspend on bigs. And I'll take a look really quick at Steven Adams' contract, but I don't. Yeah, I even like. I was a Nuggets fan, and a lot of people were really mad at like JaVale McGee making like 10 million a year. Nene Hilario made like 10 million a year back in the day. And neither of those really offended me because it's basically like spending 10 plus million a year for a 10 and 10 player as a big is not killing you. Oladipo's contract is I'm going to have to get used to the new CBA, Brian, but that being said, 20 million a year, which I think what in current ones would be like 15 million a year, is still, I don't know if I'd have given that to Oladipo.
He's just been mediocre so far. He's still young, but yeah, I don't like that contract.
I think they overpaid a little for Steven Adams, but he could become worth it. I'm not a fan of Oladipo because while he's been an above average player, he has not been worth that money.
That's right. And so again, it's the timing, right? They're 3-0. They sign these two players to big deals, and then they kind of come back onto earth. Like that's how I kind of see the Thunder this year, right? I don't remember what Patrick said in his portfolio or Arturo or anyone like that, but they're probably going to be scrapping, for a 5th through 8th playoff seed this year. So this is probably about where we expect them to be, but who knows? Maybe they're negotiating through the preseason with both the agents, and they got it done a little bit after the season started. But if their rationale was, in fact, we're 3-0, we've got to keep this core together, I'm not sure that was a great rationale.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. All right, so kind of another boring one, but acceptable. It seems like this NBA season, every NBA team that had money just gave their extension to any half-decent player. So another one was the Wolves extended not Luau, I almost said Luau Deng, but Gorgie Jang to I think 16 million a year or 16 million a year over 4 years, so $64 million deal. It's I don't hate it. He's a big, he's good. I just don't really know. It's not mind blowing. I don't think
it's kind of like Adams, right? It's slightly less money on the contract. He's not quite as good as Adams, but still a good young guy. I'd be okay with that if I were a Wolves fan.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know. I think I'm trying to think. It's like a really common joke in like a sitcom, but they're just saying, it was How I Met Your Mother, actually, but just saying it's fine over and over again. That's really my take. All right, Brian, well, we blew through all of yours, and we got about 10, 15 minutes to go to talk politics, so let's do it. The one we wanted to do, and I feel this is a little schadenfreude. I can't lie. If you listen to this podcast, a running theme is Brian runs to me with some piece from 538, and I shake my head and say, I don't really think the analysis of 538 is great. And we do it all over again. Usually that's in regards to basketball analysis. Obviously, though, politics was Nate's home court where everybody knew him. And it wasn't just Nate Silver. Every single, political analyst that uses polling data just got completely destroyed. Not just the presidential election, the Senate as well. A bunch of, blue states that had, double-digit leads according to the polls got flipped. A bunch of senators got flipped. Pretty much if you were a political scientist and you used polling data with any model that has been known for a while, you lost this election. The Cracked podcast brought up one that I haven't actually looked into, but it was a 13-question model that a guy has used to predict 13 or 30 presidential elections that said Trump would win. That just has to do more with the state of things. So maybe this does boil down to kind of our normal take on analytics of overly complex models. So it's one of those where I'm actually completely mad at the outcome, Brian, because on the first hand, Nate Silver was wrong, but I wanted him to be right? I wanted a Democratic Senate majority. I wanted Hillary Clinton in office. I did not want Donald Trump. So I would be okay if Nate Silver had swept everything, had completely predicted the Electoral College. I would have been so happy, even being angry, that I would have to say Nate Silver was right. What's more, Nate Silver's model was, I'll put this in quotes, less wrong than others because he had Trump at a 30% to win odds. And a bunch of other people, their model said, no way, Hillary Clinton's 99%. I think New York Times said 93%. Bloomberg said 89%.
And I think Real Clear and the betting markets were both kind of to lower 80s towards the end. But
yeah, predict. I knew it. This sounds really bad. I knew it was over when Predict It flipped, because Predict It was when all of the email scandal was coming out. Predict It kind of had dropped to like 40% for Trump. And then in those last couple of weeks, Predict It was hovering around 80. And then I think when Florida started coming in, Predict It just turned immediately, and it was like 20% for Clinton to win. So
Upworthy had it really early in the night too.
Yeah, I mean, it was a depressing night to watch, because what was sad for me is, I said, all of these models I don't feel super comfortable with. Say Clinton is great, and this one model I kind of feel comfortable with is on my side, so I'm feeling all right. And the minute the model I trusted, which was the betting markets, turned, even seeing, I think Clinton got as high as 49%. After that, she rallied to like 49% before the Midwest turned on her by Nate Silver. But I still was, I kind of was expecting the worst early in the night. And like I said, it's the worst case scenario for me, because on the one hand, you think, well, yes, I get to bash Nate Silver, which, like I said, I didn't want to do. I wanted him to be right. But he's getting to argue now after the fact, well, I was less wrong than other people. And here is the answer to that. And this is kind of a very analytics point that we've had against bad models like plus minus based statistics. If the data and methodology you are using doesn't work, then go back to the drawing board. And so clearly this election was a very telling point for polling data. And it's worth noting, we only have an election every 4 years. The number of data points you have for election is really sparse. It's really easy to overfit the data. These are all really common terms you see even on sites like 538. The correct response to this is not to point and say, I was less wrong than everybody else. It's to say, in my opinion, back to the drawing board. But so like I was saying, I'm not even getting that. I kind of get the schadenfreude of saying you were wrong to Nate Silver. At the same time, I still have to watch as people are saying, well, he was less wrong. And so it's a lose on all. I felt so deflated after the election, and that was even part of it.
Okay, so I'll throw that out to you then. So we've got this Nate Silver Brazil World Cup situation that I like to talk about, where he went out and said 60% chance Brazil wins this World Cup. Everyone says, oh, that's way too high. They don't end up winning it, even in their home country. And then he has this huge mea culpa afterwards. He says, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Maybe his model sucked. I don't know. And then my point is, well, 40% happens all the time. Should you really have that big of a big of a complaint there? Now all of a sudden, like you said, Nate Silver's getting credit for being the most conservative, or let's say most Trump-leaning poll aggregator of everyone. So that was a 30% on him, and I would say 30% happen all the time too. So we're just really talking 10% difference here, 30 versus 40. Now, is it really that different in these two situations? Should people treat it that differently? Or is it just like you said, maybe the model sucks? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think on both sides, it was funny because you said he basically flipped. For the World Cup, having somebody as a 60% favorite, he freaked out and said, how could I have been so wrong? And then for the election, he's, like you're saying, the inverse, 30%, saying, see, I said 30%. I said there was a good chance. And basically it's the opposite.
Now, to be fair, I don't think he actually said, I told you so at all afterwards. I think he is more in your lines of, we've got to do better. But a lot of people gave him credit for it as well.
I feel bad about this, Brian. This is normally, I normally compliment the Boxscore Geeks comment section, and I do love having a live Twitch chat. Maybe too late. I think Andrew Sutton may have already left, but I know he'll listen back later. We have some comments I feel I have to address, and I just want to be 100% clear on this. Above the Gods, who has made some good points, said, I'd never vote for a woman. Fuck off. I hate to be mean. That there are plenty of reasons not to vote for a candidate if that's the thing. If you're saying it sarcastically, I don't care. Fuck off. I don't really like that in it. We have another commenter, I hate that stupid green font, that said that Trump presidency avoided World War III. I really don't like this. I'm going to take a tangent so I can get back to basketball and be a little more lighthearted, Brian.
Stick to sports, Trey. No, sorry.
What I was going to say is DeMarcus Cousins is a player that I think we all agree. We've seen flashes of greatness, right? We've seen triple-double games. We've seen these amazing games out of DeMarcus Cousins. And, you've said one of Arturo's biggest mistakes is he's always been high on DeMarcus Cousins. Now, to be fair, you look at DeMarcus Cousins year 3. You look at his third year in the NBA, and you kind of go, all right, well, if we look at the age curve and whatever, um, if he has the jump we'd expect, maybe he can be great. And he never really followed that. And, it's unfortunate, and we can have lots of discussions. Maybe he's on the wrong team. Maybe he was bad. Maybe he was, badly coached. Maybe there are lots of reasons. But I've seen lots of people now that he's on the trading block saying he's going to do great. Any team would be lucky to have him. He'll do better in another situation. And what bugs me is if you look at the data we have on what DeMarcus Cousins has done, he just has not been a great player. He has shown flashes of greatness. He's had great months. He's had great games. He's had a few good seasons, but he has not been a star caliber player. A lot of this is shooting efficiency, turnovers, and personal fouls. I am mad at the confidence people place in what DeMarcus Cousins will do and how much they discount what DeMarcus Cousins has done. So to the exact same point that we're talking here, I see many people, and we're talking the comment sections, that are very confident about what a Trump president will look like, and then arguing against what Hillary Clinton has done in the past. And that really bugs me. The one last note to try and kind of get us, we all need to be in this together. So I'm same point about Nate Silver comment section. Maybe we're wrong. Maybe things will be okay. I know some people are getting upset at the capitulation, but it's called survival. You cannot dispute that Donald Trump is president now. There are some Hail Marys, the Electoral College. That's not going to happen. But that being said, it's a survival tactic to say, let's see what can happen. And lots of terms like, run away to Canada, that's not happening. So let's hope for the best. But getting back on track, because someone made a comment, come on, Hillary is a warmonger. I feel a better way to stress, and I'm not sure Trump is going to solve this, is the United States has been a very, the industrial military complex, right? Who was Eisenhower who warned about that,
right? Military industrial, yeah.
Military industrial complex. That is a very real problem the United States has had, where we have pumped, we spend more than the next at least four, maybe eight, some unacceptable number. We spend so much money on our military, on things we don't even need, right? We basically have tanks that we give to local police stations because the military doesn't need them. And that's an identity that I really hope as the United States we change. And so if that change, this is one of those where it's getting what you want or being right. I will be as wrong as hell. If Donald Trump turns into the best president and gets rid of the military industrial complex and fixes Obamacare and everything is great, I'll be the first to admit I'm wrong. But it's the exact same as DeMarcus Cousins. None of the data I got from what he has done in the past. He has gone bankrupt and failed many, many businesses. Watch the 30 for 30 on the USFL. You can basically say he got a huge head start because he had a rich father, a father who even did things like bought money at his own casino to keep the casino afloat. If you look at how well just giving that money to the stock market and letting it accrue interest would have done, as opposed to what Donald Trump did, yes, Donald Trump has made money. Donald Trump has a lot of money. But basically, if you had taken that money and given it to like anything, it would have made money. That's just, the United States has had tremendous growth in the last, couple of decades. So I will be the first to admit I'm wrong, but it's DeMarcus Cousins. Just like DeMarcus Cousins, nothing Donald Trump has done in his career, political or otherwise, has told me anything that I should expect greatness. And I am very terrified of people that are uber confident about what's going to happen. But as I said, as a United States citizen, I'm going to keep supporting, I'm going to support movements that I like. I'm going to vote. I'm going to do that. I'm going to keep talking, and I'm going to hope for the best. And I hope that to the comment section, come on, leave the misogyny at the door. Even if you didn't like Clinton, that's fine. Just other reasons, for fuck's sake. There's so many reasons you could say not to vote for Clinton. You don't have to go for the woman one. But let's just go forward and hope that everything goes better. That's my soapbox, Brian. We can do it. We can unite around our hatred.
Yes, we can. Oh, wait, that's over.
Hatred that DeMarcus Cousins is overrated. Come on, people. Who's with me?
And it's actually, Chalmers pointed this out earlier, too. Embiid is like the new Cousins. He has all the turnovers and personal fouls, but he gets all the other stats. So maybe in Russell Westbrook. Interesting guy.
It's amazing. And I mean, I think Embiid and Cousins, let's put these both together. I'm glad we got on this one because I'd much rather talk about DeMarcus Cousins in politics, but I still got to get on my soapbox. So win-win, I guess. Embiid and Cousins have these glaring flaws in turnovers and fouls, and you go, if they just get these under control, they'll be great. but they're both on horrible teams. And I really, I've always wondered if players get ruined in the NBA because a lot of these players are prima donnas. And I'm not trying to say that in a diminutive sense, Brian. I just mean in the sense that since these players have been preteens, I'd guess, they've been told they're great and they're amazing. And they got told they were great and amazing when high schools recruited them. They got told they were great and amazing when colleges recruited them. They got told they were great, amazing when NBA teams recruited them. And now they have millions of dollars in the bank and websites that devote thousands and thousands of years of words saying how great they are. It is really hard to shrink that ego or get perspective. And so I can't help but wonder what happens when you're on a bad team that doesn't really force you to improve, what that does to a player's development. And there are only a couple of teams that I could see DeMarcus Cousins going to that I'd see improvement. I mean, we talk about the Spurs all the time. One player I've forgotten to look at entirely this season, Brian, in large part because the Spurs are doing well and I'm not shocked, is LaMarcus Aldridge. I mean, actually, geez, he's doing horrible. Never mind. But I was going to say, last season, LaMarcus Aldridge had one of his best seasons, and it's with the Spurs, which is a team we have normally said is one of the best coached in the NBA. There are some teams that DeMarcus Cousins could go to and improve, and there are some teams I would say Embiid would probably do really well developing on. I don't think either one of them is in a good situation for that.
Yeah, interesting on Aldridge because I hadn't looked at him for a little bit either. Again, such a small number of games for the season so far, but yeah, he is stinking it up. He's not even rebounding very well, and Leonard, Gasol, Mills, and Kyle Anderson are carrying the Spurs, it looks like.
Yep.
Even David Lee. Oh, man, we've got... And, of course, the off-season darling Dwayne Dedmon is also playing great for the Spurs. So he's massive amount of rebounds and blocks. So there you go. Spurs get another good free agent.
Yeah, shocker. I'm aware. I still question them not holding on to Boban, but I mean, the one thing we may never know about Boban is it may just be possible that either conditioning or whatever, he can't stay on the court more than 20 minutes. I mean, even in Detroit, he's being limited on minutes. So it's possible they said, having a player like Dwayne Dedmon, who we may be able to ramp up to play 30 to 40 minutes a game, or a player like Pau Gasol that they can, just sip the last bits of gas out of that tank and still play him tons of minutes. Those were better options than Boban, and that may be true.
Oh, and I love this comment from Andrew Sutton here. Embiid might be trying to live up to his nickname by tanking his game on purpose. For those who don't know, Embiid's self-proclaimed nickname is The Process now. So let's see how that progresses.
That was one of I actually commented on him because he actually talked right after the election. He made a comment where he said, America's trying to tank now, just trust the process. And, my point is, yeah, well, that's a self-aware joke that's kind of funny, but at the same time, the
Wait,
70s,
who said that? Embiid or Andrew Sutton?
Embiid said that.
He said America is trying to tank under Donald Trump. That is the funniest joke I've heard about the election so far.
I just pointed out that, yeah, the 76ers are horrible. I think they're on pace to have, this may be right, the worst first 20-game record 4 seasons in a row, if I'm not mistaken. They're playing horribly. So,
yeah, well, I mean, here's the only kind of silver lining that liberals are looking at, right? Do you want that Kevin Pritchard treadmill of mediocrity with Hillary Clinton all the way through 2024, or do you want to tank, just tear this entire thing down, and then we're looking at 2020, we're going to have Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris? Who knows? We're tanking all the way down, Dre, to the bottom on this one.
We will see. I mean,
no ozone layer, no atmosphere is going to be left at that point.
I was just going to say we'll see. I mean, I think I actually a comparison I made to the election was actually the Warriors, and we were talking about the Warriors 73 wins last season, and if we can't know for sure, right, Brian? But if they had won a title, would they have pushed as hard for Durant? And I'm, in general, not, and for what it's worth, the numbers basically say a quarter of the eligible voters with basically the right proportion in a few key states voted for Trump. But the message that they had, right, is we are sick of the status quo. And even the Democrats, I think there's been a lot of talk about how basically both parties are looking over the working class. And I'm not even saying race. I'm not saying poor white, poor black. I'm saying just looking, there is a real wealth disparity in the United States. We got back on politics. Sorry, commenters. But there is a real wealth disparity in the United States, and both parties are overlooking the working class, and the working class is getting bigger, right? The number of people that are near the poverty line that have, major problems with, the housing bubble, health insurance, et cetera, is growing and growing. And you really can't keep overlooking that. And so to the Democrats' point, had the Democrats won, I think that the treadmill of mediocrity point, it's a lot easier to be complacent when you win. And them losing, Dave Barry made a great point that they did not lose by much. They lost by, basically a percentage point or two in a few key states. And one thing I could say is the demographics are shifting in our favor if we just wait this out, in the midterms, in the next election, it is more than likely that things will start going our way. That being said, on this podcast, when it comes to sports teams, we are always against we are always against teams being complacent and staying put. Our term for it is, I think if I write this up, Brian, I'll call it the Spurs maintenance mode. A team should always be improving because the status quo is always pulling a team, age, injury, other teams improving is always pulling you closer to average. So if this election pushes the Democratic Party into improving themselves in a way that they were very gradually doing, but not fast enough, clearly, to, overtake, they got blindsided by this. That could be a good thing, provided they make moves in the right thing. So I'm trying to stay optimistic. I completely understand not being optimistic. I don't want to take that away from anybody. But I do think it is important that just, same with sports teams, right? Just because you lose the finals, Brian, that's right. You yourself, Brian, lost the finals. Just because your team didn't make the playoffs, just because a star you signed didn't pan out, you don't stop. You don't go the tanking model, which is, Joel Embiid made that joke. You go, how do I improve my team so that next season I'm better? And that's the hope I have here. And if that happens, it could benefit everybody, because I think there is still both parties, Republican, Democrat, both have a gap between a majority of America and themselves that needs to be fixed. And here's hoping that can happen.
Yeah, his analogy falls short a little bit because, of course, they weren't actually trying to tank this election. They were more of the Spurs model where, David Robinson's hurt. Maybe we can... I
have to do this again. I don't understand. How are you a fan of this show? This is baffling to me.
Are we trolled in chat? I love it. We need to get some mods, but...
All right, but is talking about illegal immigration, and I'm going to combat this with data. Just go look this up. Every economist will basically say immigration helps economies, because there's basically a way, a lot of cheap stuff that you enjoy is because there are workers who are willing to do the work for cheaper. That's great. It tends to help it. The crime rates are lower. I don't care what Trump said. He's wrong. The Bureau of National what bureau? The FBI, I think, but the National Bureau of Statistics. Basically, I'm making up an agency there, so I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that, Brian. I've looked up the stats that are basically the federal stats that say the crimes committed by immigrants are not the same. If you look at crimes, they're disproportionately reported. That's a media problem. It's not the same. Our country is a country of immigrants, for fuck's sake. Sorry, I keep cussing. Patrick's going to be so proud. That is part of our character. That is part of our culture. Now, I agree 100% that there are things that need to be done with that process in general. But pointing the finger at it as if it's the reason for the cause when, essentially, if you want to look at the United States, we were just talking about wealth disparity, Brian, giving lots of money to the top 1%. That's right. I'm bringing up the 2012 election, Brian. Has a very big ripple effect on the country, and there needs to be stuff done there. And there's things that candidates, I'm not talking Trump, but candidates can do to help that. I think pointing the finger at immigrants as if they are the cause of blame, there have been countries that have done that in the past, and it does not tend to work out good for the world. Anyway.
I'll give Above the Gods benefit of the doubt. I do think he's trolling, but in case he's not, yeah, he's wrong.
All right. You and your benefit of the doubt, Brian. Okay, let's that's been a show. Let's hit shout outs.
Oh yeah, we're overtime, aren't we?
Not just by a few minutes, 4 minutes, but that's fine. We started late, but yeah, let's wrap this up. So you have like 20 shout outs, Brian. I'll let you do that. And
oh yeah, well we've been off for several weeks now, so just to close out the year in esports, this will probably be the last one. We had BlizzCon at the beginning of the month. StarCraft 2 World Championship winner was Beyond, not a big surprise, but it's still amazing that he did it teamless in this day and age to grind that out himself. So great job there. Hearthstone, I was really excited for that. Winner was Pavel. Not a huge surprise, even though he wasn't the favorite. He has a 64% all-time tournament win percentage, which is crazy for a card game. Like, think about poker, winning 74% of your hands. That's insane. Did I say 60? I meant 70. Here's the Storm. I don't know too much about it. Ballistics Gaming from Korea, so I guess they're taking over that new game. And they also won Overwatch as well, although as a country team, not an actual team. It's just Team Country Korea. And World of Warcraft Arena, that's still going, which is awesome. Team Splice, the defending champion, won. So that was it for BlizzCon. That's, all those great games are done for the year, so... SK Telecom won their third League of Legends championship. No one else has even won two. So that was a really big win for them. And that's probably the biggest, most exposure of any game. So, yeah, good job them, I guess. And one last shout out. Another StarCraft retirement, not a surprise, but Jaedong, who had a 10-plus year career, the best Zerg of all time. He is also the second highest prize earner of all time. So... yeah, the fact that he's only 26 is kind of surprising. It's saying he's an old guy, but when you're doing it since you're in your mid-teens, that's a long time. So, anyway, he was fun to watch, and that's all my shouts for this week. Oh, you do have a Robert Reich one in here, Jerry? I'm excited for that.
He has been a pretty good follower. One of the things that I've liked is he has kept a level head. Kind of, he's very angry, but one of the things that I think is important, and we've seen a lot of issues, is that, it's really easy to go on Facebook and Twitter and blogs. We do all of these, Brian, and yell and yell and yell and yell. And people think that when they do that, they're helping. And usually you're not, even when you're on, this is going to sound really weird, Brian, coming out of me after I spent a lot of this podcast yelling. Even when you're on the quote side of right, oftentimes your anger and aggression online can be misplaced and misspent, and directed energy is much more important. So I feel Robert Reich, I think I'm saying that right, has done it. He was a Secretary of Labor under multiple presidents. It's kind of a shame. He left to be a dad, basically, which, I think I would have loved him to stay around. He was under the Clintons, and I think he just stopped. But he has said lots of stuff about income inequality. He's one of the best follows. You can follow him at RB Reich on Twitter. He's on Facebook. You can just look up Robert Reich. That's REICH. Great follow. I think, if you're feeling angry right now but want to be productive, he is a good person to follow. The second one I'm going to give is a candidate you can vote for. This is Foster Campbell for the U.S. Senate. This is in Louisiana. You can go to Act Blue. We'll include the link in the show notes. But, obviously, even in the most diplomatic way, I think having some disagreement in our leadership is good, because it is really hard to represent a nation of over 300 million people with lots of different views. And the fact that the Senate, the House, the presidency, and soon to be the Supreme Court are all going to be Republican can mean that we may lose the possibility for discourse. So there is a runoff election in Louisiana for Foster Campbell for U.S. Senate. You can contribute to that, because I do think, weird tangent, Brian. It's tangent night for me. When you look at the NFL versus the USFL, when you look at the NBA versus the ABA, when you look at WWE versus WCW, these are all cases of a superior product with an inferior competitor. If you're in this election cycle, just pick your poison for which one you want to represent, the WWE, NBA, or NFL. And in all of these cases, their competitor basically collapsed entirely. The ABA collapsed and was dissolved into the NBA. WCW collapsed, was bought up by WWE for $5 million. The USFL, with Donald Trump, they won a lawsuit against the NFL for antitrust. It was worth $1. They went head-to-head with the NFL and then went bankrupt. But in all of these cases, losing the competition, I would argue, hurt the other product. I'm not saying that the other products didn't go on to be successful. I'm saying that some of their greatest advances in creativity and business were when they had competitors. So even if you're cool, even if you're a Republican and you think it's awesome that we have everything now, I still think having discourse representing the rest of the country is good. And I still think getting one more Democratic senator in office is good. So Foster Campbell, U.S. Senate, that's something you can do. If you don't want to do it, that's cool too. Thanks very much for listening. That's what we'll get.
Well, that's all I got.
Geez, in the comments, someone says, I can't read the name, Brian, because it's my stupid font. I do need to change it. But it's basically Mario, maybe the Mario Chalmers is in our comment section, says, I don't trust anyone who has a 4 in front of their height. It is true, by the way. Short does hurt people in success. So Robert Reich has done very well for himself despite being very short. Anyway, still a cool guy. Got no complaints there. Anyway, Brian, that has been our show. This has been the Boxscore Geeks show. If you found us not through our website, you can find us at boxscoregeeks.com. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook, Boxscore Geeks for both. Helps us out. Subscribe and upvote on iTunes and Stitcher, The Boxscore Geeks Show. We go live. I'm hoping, Brian, that our time slot's going to be Tuesday at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I may have to get more regimented on scheduling with a kid coming up and other stuff, but Tuesday, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If not, you can follow myself, Nerd Numbers, our producer, Boxscore Brian, aka Brian Foster, or NBA Geek Patrick Minton on Twitter to know when we are going live. And if you missed the live show, you can catch the recaps on YouTube channel Nerd Numbers. Thanks so much. Let us know of any top 10 box scores, and we will see you next week.